This is home to retired couple Peter and Maya Welton, busy doing nothing as they enjoy their retirement. But on a summer's afternoon in 2009, their peace was rudely shattered.
We just heard this almighty noise. It sounded as if my kitchen cupboards were coming off the wall.
The noise had come from the roof. Within minutes, Peter found himself scrambling up his ladder to investigate.
Good heavens above. My granddaughter was behind me, and she saw it right there in that corner. She went to touch it. She said, "Grandad, it's too hot."
Bizarrely, what Peter and his granddaughter discovered was a small solid object that had smashed through their roof.
Over the past few decades, communications have changed at an astonishing rate, and the world is becoming ever more connected. Satellites form a crucial part of the global communications infrastructure, providing us with phone, broadband and TV services. Thanks to satellites, no place on the planet is out of reach.
We live in a satellite-enabled age. You may not be able to see the spacecraft flying above us, but they are the very life support system that we all depend on every day. Earth observation satellites give us a unique vantage point. We can see the health of crops, the height of the sea, even the pattern of the winds. This helps us protect the environment and manage resources. Satellites enable long-term sustainable development and also play a key role in helping us respond to global humanitarian disasters. Communication satellites keep us connected, giving us data on the go anywhere in the world. They're powering a revolution in how we see and share information, helping us to do business, create new networks, and even stay healthy. Global positioning satellites have fundamentally changed the way we navigate and coordinate. There are now thousands of products and services, even entire industries, all relying on accurate location and timing information from space. At the same time, it's getting cheaper to access. A new generation of smaller satellites is going into orbit, packing powerful technology. The cost of launches is coming down. The Internet of Space is coming, a network of connected satellites spanning the Earth. All of this opens up incredible opportunities for business, governments, communities, all of us. This is the new space age, and we're all part of it.
We live in an information age. A lot of that information is coming from these things on orbit. One of the things that satellites do is they provide information. There's all sorts of information that now is space-based. So really, we're becoming more and more dependent on these space services and capabilities. There's roughly about 500,000 objects orbiting the Earth right now that humans have put into space. Those things die up there. Most of that stuff never comes back. Every once in a while, two of these things will collide with each other and break up and become smaller pieces. There's about 500,000 objects ranging in size from like a speck of paint all the way up to a school bus. And a speck of paint moving at the right speed, colliding against something that actually works, could render it completely useless. But we can't track things as small as a speck of paint. And so these 26,000 objects are in different orbits, going at different speeds, and we can't exactly predict when any two of these things might hit each other. We track about 26,000 satellites, and we're going to add another 20,000 just in the next 5 years. We have very specific lanes. These lanes are becoming more and more crowded. The more stuff we launch and things blow up and collide with each other, we can't track everything. So there are pieces of debris that are hazardous that we have no idea where they're at and where they're going.
Nice launch trajectory countdown net. Pad is clear.
10, 9, 8.
Launch auto sequence has started.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Go for launch.
Vehicle is supersonic. Stage separation confirmed. Dragon separation confirmed. Stage 1 is transonic. Landing light pad deployed. And Falcon 9 has landed.
Our activities in space have left traces behind, and certain orbits are at risk of becoming congested. About 17,000 man-made objects are currently being regularly monitored from the ground. Some 10,000 of these objects are fragments created by more than 250 explosions and collisions that have occurred in orbit. Explosions are caused by energy reservoirs that remain unused upon completion of a mission. Only 7% of the monitored objects are functioning satellites. The effect has been particularly evident in the low Earth orbit region. This extends to a height of about 2,000 kilometers. 2/3 of all known artificial objects can be found in this comparatively small region. However, also here, they are far from evenly distributed. For most missions, near-polar orbits between 600 kilometers and 1,200 kilometers altitude are used. For this reason, the highest collision risk can be found in the vicinity of the Earth's poles. The Earth's upper atmosphere below these altitudes prevents debris from remaining in space for long periods of time. The objects are slowed down by the atmosphere, causing them to lose height and burn up on re-entry. Orbits above 1,200 kilometers are too far away for Earth observation missions and communication applications. They are therefore used considerably less.
Until 2007, experts tracked around 12,000 large pieces of junk. But since then, two events have caused the situation to degenerate. One involved Cosmos 2251, a Russian satellite in low Earth orbit that suddenly malfunctioned. The Russians could no longer communicate with it and were unable to deorbit it to Earth. In a perpendicular trajectory at the same altitude, a brand new American satellite called Iridium 33 was in orbit. The impact sent debris flying in all directions. Around 1,000 pieces larger than 3 inches and thousands of smaller fragments were ejected into space, posing a threat to all the devices in low Earth orbit. This collision proves that an out-of-control object in low orbit is a danger to all working satellites. Another event worthy of Star Wars took place when China decided to deliberately destroy a weather satellite that was no longer in use, using a ballistic missile armed with an infrared seeker and a warhead. It was an arrogant show of strength by Chinese authorities, with no concern for the consequences. As a result of these two events, by 2010 there were more than 17,000 large pieces of debris circling the Earth.
When you think of space, you think of just that, space, emptiness, the void. But when it comes to the space around Earth, it's actually not that empty. It's filled with a whole bunch of junk, or space trash. In fact, experts think that there are millions of pieces of debris in orbit, ranging in size from bigger than a softball to smaller than a marble. So what is all of this junk hanging out around our planet? Well, that's the awkward part. It's all our stuff that we've put into space that we just don't use anymore. Sorry, Mom. That can be satellites that are no longer working, leftovers from rockets, or stuff that's come off spacecraft over time, like panels or even flecks of paint. Space debris has included some rather unique items too. There's a tool bag still up there that was lost by an astronaut during a spacewalk, a lipstick-sized capsule of Gene Roddenberry's ashes once orbited the globe for a while too. Even frozen pee used to make the rounds. Before pee recycling systems were put in place, astronauts used to dump their urine out into space, where it immediately turned into beautiful, shiny ice crystals that reflected the sun. Sure, that's lovely and all, but just like trash here on Earth, debris in space can be a big problem. It makes the space around our planet a congested and potentially dangerous place. You may think space debris is just floating out there all slow-like, but this stuff isn't really floating at all. It's actually zooming around Earth at more than 17,000 miles per hour.
All right, bye-bye. Just flies beautifully, and we are monitoring.
So at the moment, there are something on the order of 45,000 objects bigger than 10 centimeters that are routinely tracked by U.S. military, other governments, commercial actors that are just going around the Earth, that are up there as a result of what we've done in space for the last 60 plus years. There's for a satellite operator, the big question is, you launch your satellite into orbit, what risks does it face from these kinds of collisions? And that really depends on what altitude it's in. Space is very, very big. There's lots of room up there. But we tend to put satellites in very similar orbits because some altitudes, some orbits have very unique properties that are good for weather, remote sensing, or other kinds of missions. So the satellites tend to be in, group clustered in very similar locations. And unfortunately, one of the worst of these regions is between 600 and 900 kilometers, where a lot of the remote sensing satellites exist, as well as some of these new larger constellations. So at the moment, if you are a satellite operator, every once in a while, you will get an email from the U.S. military or from your government that says 3 or 4 days from now, your satellite is predicted to have a close approach to another space object. The probability of collision is 1 in 10,000, 1 in 1,000, 1 in 500. Good luck.
A European ATV supply ship burns up in the atmosphere over a remote part of the Pacific Ocean.
It is not comparable to a gunshot. The energy contained in a 1 centimeter particle hitting a satellite at that velocity roughly corresponds to an exploding grenade. So the consequences of such a hit mean a satellite failure, for larger objects, even satellite destruction and fragment generation, which again then has environmental consequences.
What space debris experts fear most is a chain reaction, where objects break apart in collisions and fragments go on to smash into other objects, creating more debris.
These collisions generate more fragments, and these fragments are candidates for new collisions to come. So follow-on collisions, if you like. And that the largest fear that we have is that we enter in some sort of cascading effect, where one collision triggers the next one. And this is not anything that will happen within a microsecond like in the movie Gravity, but this is something that will set in slowly, hardly noticeable, but unstoppable. Over decades, the frequency of collisions might increase without human influence.
Collision warnings are issued regularly for satellites operating at the critical height in polar orbits. During routine operation, about 10 objects every week come within 2 kilometers of such satellites. In recent years, ESA has had to carry out about 3 collision avoidance maneuvers per year. A particularly critical situation occurred on the 21st of January 2010. The calculated flyby distance to a disused rocket upper stage was only about 50 meters. The probability of a collision was greater than 1 to 80. The maneuver to avoid a collision was only carried out half an orbit before the determined approach epoch and increased the clearance to a safe distance of 130 meters. However, most of the artificial objects in space are uncontrolled and cannot be influenced. This means that the majority of collisions cannot be avoided using such evasive maneuvers. There have already been 4 major collisions in low Earth orbits. The most serious of these collisions was the one between an Iridium satellite and a defunct Cosmos satellite on the 10th of February 2009. Such collisions currently take place about once every 5 years. The more objects accumulate in orbit due to spaceflight activities, the more frequently such collisions are going to occur. In future, more and more collisions with fragments from earlier incidents are going to occur. This collisional cascading effect was already predicted some 40 years ago. The exponential increase in the number of objects is extremely difficult to slow down. If the current number of launches continues and no countermeasures are taken, the collision rate will eventually be 25 times what it is at present. This would make spaceflight in the important low Earth orbits almost impossible. Today, most of the debris is still caused by accidental explosions due to unused fuel on board. However, the problem can be alleviated by so-called passivation measures. These include depleting unused fuel, venting pressure tanks, and switching off batteries. Collisions can also be prevented if satellites are removed from heavily frequented orbits at the end of their missions while they are still under control. If they are brought down to a height below 600 kilometers, they will only remain in space for about another 25 years before re-entering the Earth's atmosphere. Collisions with a few items of debris remaining in this area are very unlikely. Even if no more launches took place and the space debris situation was left to its own devices, simulations have shown that the number of objects will not decrease but increase. This is caused by cascading collisions between resident objects and fragments of prior collisions. That scenario indicates that the critical density of objects in the low Earth orbits has already been exceeded. Active intervention is the only way to reduce the present critical density to a sustainable level. The active removal of large and uncontrollable objects is a considerable technical challenge associated with high development costs.
The problem of the space debris has to be fixed in 2 ways. First one, we need to stop polluting. And second way, we have to remove the garbage, if you want, and the debris.
At ESA's ESTEC Centre in the Netherlands, engineers are developing ED-Orbit, designed to capture an out-of-control satellite and remove it from harm's way. It's being tested using a robot and satellite model.
We use the camera, which is mounted on the smaller robot arm, to reproduce the motion of the satellite around the target satellite that we want to deorbit, to capture. Once we are sure we are moving like a single object, we are like, as if we were dancing, but without touching it, each other, we can move the robotic arms to grab the launcher adapter ring. So it's makes us easy to bring it down to the Earth and destroy it in the re-entry or in the South Pacific Ocean.
Another approach involves using nets to capture space junk.
So the concept is to, let's say, to mimic what the fishermen do on the sea, and so to have a very large net to stay away from our debris and med satellites that is tumbling and moving freely, and then from that distance to keep our net, and you just try to wrap all over your satellites.
Although ED Orbit is still in development, ESA scientists will be closely watching a UK mission remove debris. This will trial the net concept in the coming months, using a test satellite launched from the International Space Station.
In order to allow spaceflight to continue without restriction in future, about 5 to 10 of these objects need to be actively removed every year. This is the only way to fully stabilize the space debris population in space. However, there is a long way to go before the first service vehicle can actively remove objects. There are many technical problems to solve. Approaching an uncontrolled target object is a major challenge. This involves the avoidance of collisions with the target and determining its attitude motion. Because the target object is no longer transmitting telemetry data, the position needs to be actively determined from the ground. This requires the use of radar systems. An initial impression of the attitude motion of the object can be gained from Earth using, for instance, the Tyra tracking and imaging radar located in Germany. The final phase of approach requires the use of relative navigation, for which purpose LiDAR or radar systems can be used. The exact attitude can then be determined using a camera. The method that is used to capture the target object can be chosen depending on certain conditions such as rotation rate, the structure of the surface, and the size of the object. One possible method is to use a robotic arm to grab a suitable element on the surface of the target body, stopping the motion and berthing the object. The motion can be dampened by a clamp, which can then provide a secure frictional connection. Even the casting of a net would be feasible. This would avoid the need for direct contact with the object, which can then be towed away. These different methods permit the use of powerful thrusters. This allows the service vehicle and the target object to re-enter the Earth's atmosphere together in a controlled manner. Controlled re-entry would take place above unpopulated areas and is the ideal solution. If controlled re-entry is not required, other options are available. The object could be removed from the critical region and disposed of at lower altitudes. It would then re-enter the Earth's atmosphere due to natural air drag at a later date. The initial orbit lowering can be achieved, for instance, by solid rocket motors that are attached to the object. They would first stabilize its attitude and remove it independently afterwards. A passive method of lowering the orbital height is also available. The size of the surface can be increased considerably by attaching a sail, which will increase the atmospheric drag and therefore accelerate the orbital descent. Another idea is irradiation with an ion engine. To do this, ions are accelerated to fast speeds by an electrical field. These efficient low-thrust engines are ideal for long, continuous orbital changes. The constant bombardment of ions onto the surface of the target causes a momentum transfer to the object. Direct contact is therefore unnecessary. Before the active removal of objects can start, there are a number of legal issues to resolve.
This is a really important topic for the development of space exploration, actually, and we've got a great panel here because we've got experts in the observation, we've got experts in attempting to capture these objects and bring them down, and also the legislation as well, which is what Peter does. So let's talk about the rules, actually, I think, quickly, because we talked about some of the scary numbers. What are the rules at the moment about space
debris. If I want to launch a satellite, do I need to make sure that it has a plan to come back down again? What are the rules in place regarding the stuff that's up there already?
You know, it's amazing. We now have to think about outer space as a limited natural resource. It's kind of counterintuitive. We don't, you know, we've grown up thinking that space is vast and infinite. But it turns out that the Earth's orbital environment is now so crowded and congested that the orbital environment itself and the radio frequency spectrum are really limited natural resources. There are a number of guidelines that have been developed over the years by space agencies and which have been implemented by governments. And recently the UN implemented a series of guidelines for space sustainability. But really we need to have a much more concerted effort to develop norms of responsible behavior in space. If I can just give you a brief analogy. Imagine that you take your car out on a freeway and you drive your car until you run out of petrol or until it dies, and then you leave your car right there in the freeway. That's the kind of situation we're facing in outer space right now, and why we need norms of responsible behavior.
And it's legal to do that, right?
Right now it's legal to do that, yes.
Nobu, you're from Astroscale, from Japan. You're an expert in how to clean up space, how to start to attack this problem. Tell us about what the technologies are at the moment, what the ideas are that we're thinking about.
Peter said the number of the debris has increased to the critical level where the chain reaction of the collision can happen at any near future. So we have to remove large objects now before they get smaller. If they break up, collide, and become smaller, it's really hard to clean up. So we have to remove large objects now. So we are developing technologies, removing satellites, and we're going to have a world-first demonstration next year. And once you go up to the space, there are so many lights, moon, star, earth, sun, and the debris. You have to identify which debris you want to approach. And you have to approach the debris and sit back behind the debris. But even if you successfully approach the debris is tumbling, rotating. So how you capture this debris? And our satellite will synchronize the motion, dance with the debris, and capture, stabilize, and bring them down to the atmosphere and burn. So that's our solution.
Copy that. That's 20 seconds until execution of capture sequence.
How long before we see you flying a mission that's going to go and grab a bit of space junk?
So it took 7 years to develop this technology, and now we are talking with the regulatory bodies to have a best practice and identify the safety level, and we are collaborating a lot. I think over the next 7 years, the space debris removal will be just a routine work. Nowadays, we got so many media attentions, but in 7 years, we are just every day, we are just sweeping the space, just silently. That's the day I want.
What a wonderful image.
Now imagine sitting at home and you hear a loud boom. Then you discover something had crashed into your roof, blew through the floor, finally lodging into your bedroom wall. Well, it just happened to one homeowner, and as Stephen Fabian reports, the flying object came from outer space.
A mysterious object falls from the sky. You can hear the impact when it crashes into a home. Look at the damage it caused. A hole from the roof straight through the floor.
It's either space junk or space meteorite. It's 50-50.
So what was it? Turns out it was space junk from the International Space Station.
Maybe I don't have a shield. What? Yeah, I don't have a shield.
Where is it? Oh, it's right by the radiator. Maybe a half a foot a second, and one looks like straight paint from the radiator angle.
We copy and we see it.